Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are strapping in for a session that really moves beyond just analyzing symptoms.
Okay.
We are examining a detailed blueprint for an entirely new global economic system.
Right.
And I mean, we're not talking about minor policy tweaks. This is a fundamental redesign from the ground up.
That's right. We are embarking on, well, an in-depth exploration of what this sources call the MuRatopia economy.
MuRatopia.
And the mission of this deep dive is to really deconstruct a systemic solution that claims it can eliminate the root causes of all these modern recurring crises.
All of them. That's a big claim.
It is. I'm talking about the crippling weight of national debt, the predictability of banking crises, the structural engine of inflation, embedded inequality,
And even the risks we're seeing with things like CBDCs.
and the centralization risks inherent in technologies like CBDCs. Exactly.
In the sources we're looking at, they identify the core problem not in, say, human nature or even just bad regulatory policy,
No, not at all.
but in systemic built-in design failures. They pinpoint two primary culprits that, and this is key, must be addressed simultaneously.
Right. And those are, first, the system design failures of debt money, and second, the mechanisms of what they specifically term globalism.
So when you pull all this material together, the argument is that any attempt to fix these persistent problems with our current tools, monetary policy tweaks, fiscal spending,
Even democratic reform.
right, even that, it's ultimately futile
Yeah.
because the underlying architecture of control is just fundamentally flawed.
Precisely. A true solution, according to this, requires a dual transformation, an overhaul of how we create and distribute money, and a complete restructuring of how we define corporate control and ownership.
Okay, let's unpack this then. I mean, we are looking at a really radical structural proposition here, starting with a critique of globalism that goes way beyond the standard trade discussions.
It really does.
The sources seem to suggest that globalism is less about efficiency and much more about deliberate organized control.
Yeah, and to really understand that critique, we have to first accept a distinction they draw. It's between globalization and globalism.
With a Z versus an S.
Exactly. So globalization with the Z is characterized as this unstoppable organic process. It's just a natural outcome of social and technological evolution.
The internet, global supply chains, instant communication.
Right. All the things that break down physical boundaries.
Yeah.
That movement, they say, is irreversible.
But globalism within a says, that's the political and ideological framework that gets imposed on top of that natural process. The sources define it not as free trade, but as a calculated divide and rule tactic.
Precisely. And they argue this tactic is driven by a very, very specific end goal.
Which is?
The establishment of an authoritarian supranational government operating under the umbrella of a single centrally controlled world currency.
Wow. And they actually identify who is pushing for this.
They do. They say the advocates of globalism are a highly influential yet small network. We're talking academics, powerful financiers, religious figures, and political elites who all kind of share this common vision.
And what's their primary motivation, according to this analysis? It seems to be all about control and maximizing capital extraction, right?
That's the heart of it. The sources explicitly point to the international banks, which consistently make up the majority of the top 25 control holders in what analysts call the network of global corporate control.
So it's a very concentrated power network.
Extremely. And for this incredibly powerful network, national borders and domestic regulations, things like minimum wage laws, environmental standards, specific tax codes.
All the things a nation state does to protect its citizens.
Yes. They're not seen as necessary protections. They are just labeled structural barriers.
Barriers to what?
Barriers that constrain the network's ability to efficiently exploit and mobilize capital, natural resources, and labor wherever they might be cheapest or most easily accessed.
So if you're a massive, centralized financial entity, having to respect 50 different sets of regulations is just an inefficiency tax on your global operations.
Exactly.
Globalism, then, is the political engine designed to just dismantle those barriers and create a single, unified, accessible pool of global resources for exploitation.
And critically, this whole pursuit relies on the stability of two things. First, the continued operation of the debt money system, which we'll get to.
Right.
And second, the successful implementation of their division strategy.
Okay, that brings us to the divide and rule strategy itself. The core argument here is that globalists actively implement strategies to foster distrust and enmity among the masses.
Yes, specifically to prevent any kind of unified alliances that might recognize and then challenge the structural status quo.
So it's all about distraction and fragmentation.
It is. The sources are extremely detailed in cataloging these division tactics, suggesting they're deployed across, every conceivable fault line in human society.
All to keep we the people focused on fighting each other rather than looking up at the puppet strings of the monetary system.
That's the argument.
I want to list these with some energy because the scope they lay out is it's comprehensive. They track them historically.
Go for it.
Religious divisions, citing Protestants versus Catholics, Judaism versus Islam, racial and ethnic divisions like white versus black, Jews versus Gentiles.
The classics.
Ideological wars, capitalism versus communism, political polarization, conservatives versus liberals, the list goes on.
And crucially, the sources argue this tactic has evolved to encompass more recent social fractures, gender, sexuality, moral issues.
Right. They explicitly categorize these really intense political battles like the majority versus the LGBT minority or the conflicts between pro-life and pro-choice camps. They see these as modern, effective applications of that same divide and rule mechanism.
It's a very strong claim.
Wait, so the sources are claiming that all of these deep-seated social divisions from, ancient religious history to modern social justice issues are deliberately manufactured, or at least weaponized, by a network of elites just to distract us from the money system. That's a politically loaded claim. That requires extraordinary evidence.
It is a profound claim, and the sources approach it, it's important to say, strictly from a systems perspective. They're not assigning moral blame to the people caught up in these divisions.
Okay.
They're arguing that the effect of these intense, emotionally charged conflicts is to consume virtually all available political and intellectual energy. This constant state of internal conflict successfully distracts society from recognizing the true, singular root of the problem.
Which is the system of control through money.
Exactly. The divisions are the smokescreen. The money system is the source of the globalists' power.
It's the ultimate misdirection play, the classic sleight of hand.
And that leads directly to the analogy the sources use to capture this whole dynamic.
Which is?
The Wizard of Oz.
Ah, the famous image.
Yes. Globalists employ loudspeakers, which they call the media, and theatrical equipments like smoke screens and explosions.
The constant, overwhelming noise of manufactured conflict.
Right. And it's all to tell the public, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
This is where the systems analysis really comes in then.
It is. The focus has to shift away from criticizing the individual wizards, the corporate heads, the politicians, the financiers.
Because those people are transient.
They age out, they get replaced. What matters is ending the system structure itself. The underlying mechanism of control that allows that fear and illusion of power to persist, regardless of who's temporarily sitting in the chair.
So the realization is that focusing on the individuals, the wizard, is itself a distraction. The systemic design failure is the true opponent. We shouldn't be trying to name the temporary wizard. We should be trying to unplug the machine he uses.
Exactly. And viewed through that lens, the transition to public money is identified as the first critical leverage point.
A leverage point.
In systems thinking, it's a place where a small shift can lead to huge changes. By correcting the money system first, you attack the core source of their power, which is the ability to create money out of debt and charge interest on it.
Okay, that seems like an overwhelming victory right there. But the sources immediately pivot, and they say that even a public money system would not be sufficient on its own to defeat globalism.
Right.
So why is transitioning to public money only the first step?
Because the globalists, or, the capital owners, they have a second independent source of unearned income.
Which is?
Dividends and rents derived from equity ownership. Even if the state prints interest-free public money, the existing capitalist structure means that these financial elites can still maintain control and extract profit unearned income just by exercising their rights as owners of equity in profitable businesses.
That's the crux of it. If I eliminate debt-based money, I get rid of the banker's control over the creation of money. But if I still let a massive hedge fund own the underlying equity of a business, they still dictate management. They still extract dividends. They still control the business's direction, even if they never set foot inside.
Precisely. If the system design failure of debt money is fixed by Pillar 1, which is public money, the next necessary step is to address the structural mechanism of equity ownership. That's how you truly stop business control and end economic tyranny under shareholder capitalism. And this institutional requirement, this is the core of MuRatopia's structural innovation.
Okay, so to stop this outside control, the sources propose a pretty radical institutional transition. Equity ownership has to be replaced with what they call equity possession.
And this is the critical conceptual hurdle, I think, for anyone familiar only with, Western capitalist legal frameworks.
Let's define this distinction very precisely, though. In standard capitalist ownership, the sources define it as the exclusive and absolute right to dispose of private property. And what's crucial is the legal definition that this right exists beyond time and space.
Beyond time and space.
Which means the legal owner retains the right to sell, to liquidate, or set policy, even if another person is physically possessing or managing the property today. We see this with absentee landlords or, long-term inherited trusts.
Yeah, that beyond time and space clause is what allows capital owners to control a business or property they never physically set foot in, or whose management they never participate in. The entire exchange system of a capitalist economy is built on transferring this absolute right of disposal.
In contrast, MuRatopian possession is defined as private ownership that is strictly confined by time and space.
Right.
So it's the exclusive right of disposal held only by those who are in a state of actual management and who are sharing the property at this moment.
So if possession is institutionally imposed on private ownership, the outside legal owners, the shareholders, they can no longer exercise their right of disposal from outside the organization or based on a contract made decades ago. It confines the right of disposal to only here and now and to the active participants. This is the essence of possession and the only institutional requirement for property management within MuRatopia.
This fundamentally challenges the structure of, every publicly traded company and every non-working capital owner. So how is this revolutionary concept enforced legally? We need to understand the three institutional principles that make this possession distinction binding.
Okay, so these principles, they define the internal governance and the external relationship of any MuRatopian business unit.
Let's hear them.
Principle 1 is automatic possession at participation. So when coworkers join a MuRatopian organization, they automatically become possessors of the production units, the facilities, machinery, intellectual property. Instantly.
Yeah.
They automatically join the self-management structure democratically. And critically, no coworkers can be dismissed against their will, except through a democratic vote of their coworker peers if they, say, violate the organization's charter.
So this institutionalizes worker control and democratic governance from day one.
It does.
So joining the workplace means you instantly gain a stake, a management role, and absolute job security unless your peers collectively decide otherwise. That is a massive shift from the at-will employment model we see in so much of the West.
It creates loyalty and long-term investment in the firm's success. Then you have Principle 2, automatic dispossession at departure.
Makes sense.
So when coworkers leave the organization, whether voluntarily or involuntarily through a peer vote, they automatically dispossess the production units and lose control over self-management from the outside.
And upon death, too, I assume.
Dispossession also occurs upon death. The possession is non-heritable.
This is crucial for preventing the perpetual concentration of economic power. It means, Bill Gates' great-grandchildren can't inherit control over a technology company they never worked at.
Exactly. The control and the right of disposal are entirely contingent upon active, current involvement in the work itself. You cannot passively own or transfer control across generations.
Unless you join the company as a worker.
You can only inherit possession if you actively join the organization as a coworker.
And then we have Principle 3, possession of the production units as a niche.
Right.
The sources say everyone is entitled to freely create or seek their fittest niche, their habitat, in the form of possession. But the rule here is absolute. No one is allowed to derive economic benefits from possession itself.
This is the most abstract, but probably the most vital principle for understanding the economic flow.
Okay, so let's use a concrete example. Let's say we have a MuRatopian bakery. The physical stocks are the assets, the ovens, the mixing equipment, the real estate.
And the net flows are the production outputs, the bread, the cakes, the services, and the money generated from selling those outputs.
Okay, so if the coworkers in this bakery decide to sell it as a functioning business to a new group of coworkers, say, the old team retires and a young team takes over the lease and operations, what happens?
Under Principle 3, the sale of the physical production units is defined as nothing but a change in the form of possession without payment for the physical stocks themselves.
Without payment.
The original possessors, the retiring workers, do not profit from the sale of the factory or the ovens. They only profited from the net flows, the bread they sold, the profits they distributed as wages and dividends over their entire working life.
So the retiring workers can't just sell the building for $5 million and retire wealthy based on asset appreciation.
No.
The new possessors, the young team, they take over the assets, the physical stocks, without buying the stock. The former workers only profited from the flow of production over time, not the underlying assets they possessed.
That is the key distinction. The physical stocks are continuously self-managed, accumulated, or destroyed by the current possessors. Economic benefits come only from the net flows, the consumption and investment goods that are generated through production and exchange, not from exchanging the production units themselves.
It eliminates speculation.
It eliminates speculation and rent-seeking based on fixed assets.
So this completely redefines the incentive structure. Investment isn't about gaining control or flipping an asset. It's about optimizing the flow of actual productive output.
And once you institutionalize these three principles, the power dynamic fundamentally changes. Outside shareholders, the traditional capitalists, they cannot participate in management decisions unless they commit to working as co-workers.
So they might retain the right to receive dividends if they invested, but their voting rights.
Their voting rights are entirely confined to the co-workers, the active members.
So non-worker shareholders, they just get dividend rights, which are passive. They lose direct managerial control.
Right. Their only form of external influence is the weak vote of selling their stocks. And this is how business workplaces transition to being genuinely self-managed, realizing participatory democracy, and ending the economic tyranny of shareholder capitalism.
This dual reform, public money and equity possession is what they're presenting as the comprehensive solution to globalism. #3, the 4 pillars of the MuRatopia economy.
Exactly. And that structural revolution brings us to the 4 main pillars that support the entire MuRatopia economy.
And the sources position this model as something that transcends the historical economic views, right? Capitalism, socialism, communism.
Because all those previous systems operated under the systemic dysfunction of debt money.
Okay, so let's lay out the foundation, starting with the monetary overhaul. Pillar 1 is public money, the foundation. This is the fix for the debt money system design failures. A transition to interest-free, publicly issued currency.
The causal mechanism here is crucial to understand. In our current dead money system, money is created ex nihilo as a loan that carries interest.
Right.
This means that for every dollar created, the economy structurally requires slightly more than $1 to be paid back.
Which is impossible in the aggregate.
It necessitates constant exponential economic growth just to service the interest debt. And that perpetually fuels built-in inflation and instability.
And the elimination of interest fundamentally changes that dynamic.
Completely. The results of Pillar 1, as they list them, are extensive. A, it alleviates the repeated business cycles, the boom and bust, by removing the structural requirement for constant exponential debt expansion that drives inflation, and then inevitable deflation and recession.
And for governments.
B, it reduces government debts to zero, because the government no longer has to borrow money into existence from private banks. It simply issues money interest-free.
And for us, the people.
C, it eliminates the built-in income inequality that is structural between the bankers, who are the debt money lenders, and the non-bankers, who are the borrowers. The debt-based transfer of wealth from borrower to lender is just removed.
So it's asserting that just by changing the source and the type of money creation, you eliminate these massive macroeconomic problems that policymakers have struggled with for centuries.
Because they were attacking the symptoms, not the underlying system design.
Okay, moving on to the structural control mechanism. Pillar 2 is self-managed business, the control mechanism. This is where they implement the shift from equity ownership to equity possession we just detailed.
And its goal is simple: end globalism by abolishing equity ownership control.
Yeah.
The results include establishing genuine participatory democracy at the workplace through Principle 1.
And the big ones.
And E, eliminating the massive income inequality that exists structurally between outside shareholders, the capitalists, and the workers or employees. When the workers are the possessors and the managers, they retain the full value of their output.
Okay. Pillar 3 is the free and laborless market, the social shift. This concept is, well, it's perhaps the most challenging to grasp. What exactly constitutes a laborless market?
This is a critical point that needs some clarity. It doesn't mean automation has eliminated all necessary work.
Right.
The goal is a fundamentally different market structure, and its results are twofold. First, it eliminates the capitalist labor market. And the sources explicitly define the capitalist wage system as one where wage labor is traded like slavery.
Like slavery, that's a highly provocative term.
It refers to the power imbalance. Under capitalism, if your entire livelihood depends on selling your labor as a commodity to an external capital owner who holds absolute ownership and can fire you at will, your negotiation power is inherently suppressed.
You're not truly free.
Exactly. The laborless market means abolishing that commodity exchange of labor. Since workers are the possessors and managers under Pillar 2, they're working for themselves, distributing net flows democratically, and they're non-dismissible against their will. Their labor isn't traded, it's self-managed participation.
So the economic dependency that suppresses free speech and authentic negotiation is just removed.
Exactly, which leads to results advancing free speech and authentic market activities, because the workers are no longer economically dependent on the external whims of shareholders.
And finally, Pillar 4 is sustainability, the long-term vision.
This provides the holistic framework. It aims to establish a diversified and peaceful society by attaining 3 specific levels of reproducibility: physical, social, and ecological reproducibility. Physical is ensuring the basic infrastructure and resource base can sustain the population. Social is maintaining the democratic self-management structures and social harmony. And ecological is, well, living within the natural constraints of the environment.
And Pillar 1, the public money, provides the essential foundation for these long-term goals by removing the perpetual pressure for unsustainable exponential growth.
Correct. Without that debt-based interest mechanism demanding constant expansion, society can actually choose stabilization and ecological balance over short-term profit maximization.
Okay, let's talk competitive advantages. If I'm a traditional capitalist investor, I'm thinking, why would a MuRatopian firm ever be able to compete with my aggressive, profit-driven entity?
The sources make a strong case by comparing them to existing models, like the very successful Mandarin Corporation cooperatives in Spain or, firms practicing employee-centric Japanese management. These models already show valuing employee enrichment and long-term stability often beats short-term profit chasing.
But the crucial difference is that MuRatopian enterprises exist within a public money system.
And that combination is explosive. First, the externally stabilized economy from Pillar 1 minimizes external shocks, creating a reliable business environment. Internally, the lifetime stable employment and equitable distribution encourage workers to truly invest their ingenuity and loyalty, driving massive gains in productivity and efficiency.
Worker retention would be extremely high.
Of course, they're working for their own long-term success.
But what is the biggest competitive edge in the marketplace, especially during, say, a recession?
Flexibility.
Right.
Because they are self-managed and not beholden to outside shareholders, MuRatopian enterprises can allow wages to vary elastically in response to business cycles.
So if a recession hits,
They can collectively decide to temporarily lower their net flow distribution to keep the company running and maintain market share, which enables competitive prices. They can absorb downturns that would instantaneously collapse a capitalist firm that's facing fixed quarterly dividend demands from Wall Street.
that stability and elasticity.
The sources argue that's what positions MuRatopia to replace the capitalist economy entirely.
We've broken down the economic mechanics, but we need to ground the underlying philosophy here. The word MuRatopia is clearly a hybrid concept.
It is. It was coined in 1988 by Kaoru Yamaguchi, combining the suffix "atopia," meaning place, with 3 components that integrate east and west: Mura, Mu, and Ra.
Okay, let's start with Mura. It literally means village in Japanese, right?
It does. And this embodies the structural vision. Coworkers living cooperatively, being self-sufficient in essentials, helping each other, and fundamentally respecting nature.
But the sources cite this not as some idealistic dream, but as a historical truth.
Yes, and this is where I get the most surprising fact: the validation through the Jomon civilization.
This is truly mind-bending history. The Jomon civilization existed in the Japanese archipelago, starting approximately 17,000 years ago, and maintained a stable society for an astonishing 14,000 years.
14,000 years.
Lasting until about 3,000 years ago.
To put that into perspective for you, the commonly cited cradle of civilization, Sumer, appeared roughly 7,500 years ago. Jomon not only predates it massively, but lasted twice as long as all of recorded Western history.
It's a profound, sustained example of successful, non-hierarchical social stability.
And the most incredible finding, the sociological implication that really challenges our standard theories of human aggression, is the archaeological data. Over 95,000 sites investigated.
And what did they find? or not find?
They found no lethal weapons.
None.
That absence is not just an anecdote. It strongly suggests a civilization with no culture of homicides, no slavery, and crucially no class hierarchy based on sustained violence or economic oppression. The village, the Mura, was a sustainable social unit for an incomprehensible span of time.
And the sources connect this ethos.
They link the ethos of these peace-loving villagers directly to later historical principles, like Prince Shotoku's 17-article constitution from 604 AD. Be mindful of harmony and do not fight each other.
So, Mura grounds the concept in historical success and sustainability, providing the blueprint for social reproducibility. Now we turn to the philosophical components, Mu and Ra.
Right, so Mu is symbolic of Eastern civilization, rooted in Zen Buddhism. It means nothingness or emptiness.
Which can be a difficult concept.
The sources use system dynamics to explain this abstract idea. Think about it. Our body is not an isolated entity. It is a living system requiring constant inflows and outflows of air, food, information, connected inextricably to the environment. If we cut off that connection, we die.
Therefore, the sustainable environment isn't external to us, it becomes part of our expanded body.
Exactly. When we claim ownership of subsets, my hand, my desire to be rich, those are not the whole set of myself. The whole self is a continuous living system that's inseparable from its environment. So where is myself in this expanded, constantly flowing body and environment?
It's nowhere. It's Mu.
It is Mu. Attachment to the subset, the desire, the ego is an illusion and the source of suffering, because the true self is the flow. The goal is to realize the sustainable environment is inseparable from the body itself.
And on the other side of that coin, we have Ra, symbolic of Western civilization, meaning naked or born naked.
Yes, Ra emphasizes the physical body, the individual, and the concept of inalienable rights, that we are born naked by nature as free and equal individuals. It's the necessary foundation for participatory democracy and individual liberty.
And the synthesis is Muraholism. How does Eastern nothingness unify with Western individuality?
The sources cite the core teaching of the Heart Sutra. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. They apply this directly. Ra, the body, the form, is Mu, the emptiness, the whole system, and vice versa.
Ra is Mu, and Mu is Ra.
Exactly. The individual, Ra, recognizes that their individual sustenance and freedom are entirely dependent on the sustainable operation of the whole system, Muhais. It's not a conflict between individual rights and systemic sustainability. There are two sides of the same coin.
This holistic view naturally leads to the diversity of salvation.
Right.
If the world is a system of coexisting individuals dependent on the whole, MuRatopia has to provide room for true spiritual diversity, transcending traditional theisms.
And the sources classify the three main spiritual approaches that must mutually respect each other as co-inhabitants. You have Joman salvation, through sun nature and ancestor worship, rooted in the environment.
Then Eastern and Western.
Eastern salvation, which is inner salvation, through meditation and realizing new. And Western salvation, outer salvation, through devotion to God or gods.
The ultimate takeaway is that mutual respect is non-negotiable, ensuring that spiritual or philosophical life doesn't create the divide and rule tactics that globalism relies on. It's an institutionally enforced peace on the spiritual front, running parallel to the economic peace established by the four pillars. #V hugging civilizations and monetary history.
Yes, and this new Muraholism, it implies coexistence and mutual respect, which the sources literally term hugging one another.
Hugging one another.
This philosophy is a direct alternative to the widely cited clash of civilization model, and this coexistence is expected to emerge naturally as the economic friction points are resolved by the four pillars.
So to put this proposed shift into context, the sources provide a classification of human history, but viewed specifically through the lens of the monetary system. They divide it into four distinct economic ages.
Right. Age 1, pre-money economy. This characterized the earliest local villages, especially that Jomon period. Exchange was often decentralized, using commodities like shells, hemp, silk, or other locally valuable goods as mediums of exchange. It was local and self-sufficient.
Then comes age 2, public money economy.
This age began with the rise of city-states and nation-states. Public money of varying materials was issued without interest by public entities like kings or governments. The sources note that the birth of public money and the rise of the nation-state are, inseparable historically.
And then we get to age 3, debt money economy.
This is the era we are currently living in. It began as early as the Middle Ages and accelerated dramatically in the modern era. It's characterized by private banks issuing debt money loaned at interest.
And the key phrase there,
This lending and borrowing became the dominant economic activity, and critically, the main means of control for that network of financial elites. The entire system is built on creating scarcity where none needs to exist.
So this is the historical aberration that the MuRatopia model aims to correct.
Indeed, which brings us to age 4, MuRatopia Economy. This is the future vision, utilizing interest-free public money and electronic public money, or EPM.
And this money is issued differently.
It's issued under decentralized social systems, directly supporting the free economic activities of the possessors and co-workers. This structural arrangement makes money entirely power neutral,
Which contradicts a core economic belief.
it finally contradicts the neoclassical economic belief that money is neutral. The sources argue that debt money is profoundly non-neutral. It is a tool of control. Only public money, issued interest-free and decentralized, can be truly power neutral.
So the progression is fascinating. Local commodity exchange, state-issued interest-free money, private bank debt money, our current crisis, and finally, interest-free, power-neutral, public electronic money under a decentralized social system.
That's the timeline.
And this movement back to public money, coupled with the structural shift from ownership to possession, is what allows civilizations to move from clashing to hugging.
The structural stability removes the economic imperative for competition and exploitation, which in turn removes the fuel for the divide and rule tactics. #tag outro.
Wow. This has been a monumental deep dive. We've moved from analyzing the systemic design flaw of debt money and the intentional fragmentation of globalism all the way to exploring a comprehensive solution blueprint, MuRatopia's 4 pillars.
Public money, self-managed business.
Right, through equity possession, the free and laborless market, and long-term sustainability.
And what's fascinating here is that the urgency of this transition is grounded in the repeated failure of the existing system. The sources use historical lessons, particularly the collapse of the Japanese bubble and the subsequent global financial crises since 2008, to reinforce the point.
Yeah, point.
The debt money system is the root cause of these systemic failures. The national debt, the banking crises, the built-in inequality. We are not facing isolated problems. We are watching a broken system fail repeatedly.
And the most critical knowledge gap, according to these sources, is just awareness. The majority of people are still unaware that 99% of the money they use has been taken over and is controlled by the debt money system.
A system that fundamentally requires them to be perpetually in debt.
This raises the most important question for you, the listener. The final choice presented is monumental and must be recognized by the majority. The choice between public money and debt money. It determines whether we, the people, control our own futures or become slaves of the debt money.
This is the ultimate institutional hurdle.
So if the solution is entirely systemic and institutional, and the majority is unaware of the structural choice they face, how do we even begin the necessary shift? We've covered the entire blueprint. What is the proposed action plan?
Well, the sources strongly advocate against waiting for top-down change. The proposed path is to build a bottoms-up movement.
And how does that start?
It starts simply. Talk about this money problem, the mechanism of debt money creation, with the people around you. Bring this structural problem to the attention of legislators, framing monetary reform as the top national priority.
It seems so simple.
The underlying philosophical principle they leave us with, echoing the stability of the Jomon period, is that crisis is an opportunity. This current failing system is the opportunity to institute something structurally sound.
An incredibly detailed and provocative look at a full system replacement, unifying monetary policy, organizational control, and thousands of years of human history. Thank you for guiding us through this extensive material.
Always a pleasure. This material truly challenges our fundamental assumptions about how a functional economy should be structured.
And for you, our listener, here's your final provocative thought. If the MuRatopia model posits that true societal sustainability requires replicating the peaceful, non-hierarchical structure of the 14,000-year-old Jomon civilization, what specific aspects of modern technology, the very technology that fuels globalization, could be leveraged to support such decentralized, peaceful self-management rather than centralized authoritarian control? Can technology be weaponized for possession, not just ownership? Something for you to mull over until our next deep dive.